Hello, everyone. This is SEC1337, week 9, going in a different direction. We're going to talk about offensive security because it is the best. It's all about adversarial behavior, hacking, exploitation, getting what you need out of an organization, a person, so on and so forth. So some terms that you need to be familiar with just to start off. This is a thing called penetration testing. This is essentially limited in scope, and it's done usually by third parties to assess vulnerabilities within an organization within a particular time frame, normally within a limited scope, like, oh, these particular assets, this network, this list of cloud servers. It's not very comprehensive, but it gives you kind of a baseline of where your security posture is. So it's a good first step. In a lot of cases, it's required for compliance and things. So limited. And then you've got red teaming, and this is the more comprehensive. It's designed to simulate real world adversaries and what are called advanced persistent threats, APTs. And so the idea is this is a kind of continuous process. Larger companies will normally have their own red team internally, and so they're constantly assessing the security. They're looking at all 8 layers of the OSI model. They're running through distinct phases of the campaign, which I'm going to cover here, like 7 phases primarily. And they're doing it and they're working with the blue team, which are the defenders, to continually improve the security posture of the company. And sometimes you have an outside company, but more often than not, it's going to be internal. And then kind of the domain of good guy hacking is known as ethical hacking. So either of these concepts falls under that umbrella. Ethical hacking, it's like one person's hero is another person's terrorist, but really at the end of the day, ethical is defined by, are you following some kind of a scope of work and rules of engagement, and sort of based off of someone actually hiring you as opposed to just going rogue and attacking companies and without their permission and stuff. And also teaching people, I love hacking. Offensive security is my favorite domain. You get to show people what's possible to then help themselves, defend against, potential attacks, and cover bits and pieces of it across the weeks, physical security, application security, but this is going to be more in depth and give you a sense of the entire spectrum of offensive security and what it all entails. So let's start. There's different phases, right? Any particular red team campaign or breach has to start somewhere, and there's a distinct phase. So normally the first step for any adversary or group or APT, you have to do reconnaissance, and this is both passive and active. So passive is what we refer to as open source intelligence, OSINT. So OSINT is great for gathering information that's publicly available about companies, individuals, from sources like LinkedIn, Spokio, People, Twitter, Instagram. There are ways in which to use this information and automate the collection of it to build a pretty robust profile of like the organization you're, targeting and attacking and so on. And it gives you a sense of who might work there, what valuable assets they have, what technologies are they running, all of these things without ever touching any of their systems. So it's really handy. There's a ton of tools, but the OSINT framework is a great resource to show you all the particular decisions and directions in which your OSINT discovery can go into. So it's like if you're looking for a user, go use this service. If you're looking for a DNS record or an email, go this way. It's a really robust and automated framework. There's also another tool called the Harvester, as well as Discover. Discover is a series of like scripts and automation to build passive and active OSINT, really understand your target, because you want to find a way in, and you need to understand what's happening in that organization, who the key players are, so you know who the target. And an active is like more aggressive sort of reconnaissance where maybe you're scanning assets, running Nmap or vulnerability scans, or you're trying to launch application attacks, so layer 7 attacks, maybe you're trying SQL injection, cross-site request forgery, all these like aggressive attacks, but you're still on the outside and you're still trying to gain information. You're trying to figure out the technology, maybe the defenses that are in place, if any, so that you know how to like weaponize your exploit, right? And so then you move on. So after your reconnaissance is done, then really you focus on weaponization or finding a way in, like exploitation. So weaponization, as I mentioned last week with human security, the most common pathway in is layer 8, which is the human layer. One, because it's very vulnerable, because people, are juicy targets. You can compromise every layer below 8. And as security gets better and better, so does the sophistication of attacks against people. And, like I had mentioned, a lot of times our security controls are not robust enough to prevent these bits of info getting to people. A lot of these attacks should never make it to people's inboxes or Slack channels or any number of places. If we're doing our job as security professionals, very, very minuscule amounts of information will ever pass through. But so weaponization is normally going to be focused on, okay, we know who the CEO is and the CTO, or, and we're going to just try to get try to get a foothold. So we're going to send like a phishing email typically. We're going to like scan maybe for some code repositories to get into like a public facing server, so I'm going to walk through just like an example of, let's just say, a common, spear phishing. And remember, spear phishing is when you're specifically targeting an individual based off of detailed information you've gathered from the OSINT process. So like, you know everything about the CEO, you know everything about his assistant. You're going to craft an email related to maybe work that he's doing with another partner. Like, hey, John Moynihan from Bank of America, we need to close out this Brex deal, so on and so forth. Click this link, maybe do a drive-by download or get credentials or some way into the network, right? And so weaponization, that's what that's all about. And then the exploitation, or the way in. So you weaponize it, then you exploit. Exploit is the way in which you get access to the network, be it internal, be it SaaS apps, anywhere where the company has important information. Every target's different. And so, it's important to understand the technology and the architecture of an organization. So old organizations typically will be running Microsoft Active Directory. That's where the crown jewels are. And within Active Directory, then, if you compromise that, it's pretty much game over. And so that's typically the case with any company over 10 years. So that's going to be your target. And the specific attacks against Active Directory, which I don't need to go into super detail here, but that's usually the goal. Because when you get domain admin as an Active Directory, within Active Directory, you can pretty much grab files galore. You can pretty much pivot to any computer, log in any computer, sit on the network. You can run backups, pull databases, all kinds of things. That's exploit. And then there's another route for, younger companies, which is normally going after like some kind of online identity provider, like a cloud identity provider, such that, so the cloud identity provider. And so what happens there is you go into AWS, for example, or you go to Okta, and Okta is like your IDP. And so all the stuff is in the cloud. Your authentication, your users, it's a different domain. You're not going to just attack infrastructure that's on premises or in a hybrid environment. You're going to literally attack the service provider. So there's different things to consider rather than just like classical attacks against Windows, like attacks against LDAP and Kerberos. You're probably looking more at attacks against SAML, SSO, abusing like super admin within the directory, within the applications. But similarly, a lot of cloud services are vulnerable and they sit on the internet. And so this is what happens with a lot of companies. Same with Amazon and like storage buckets, S3 and so on and so forth. So you want to exploit somehow, or you want to get access after you've weaponized any number of ways. And so once you're in, kind of the next step in the phase is you want to then like move laterally. You want to jump around the network, the environment, to get various, to understand what's happening, where the important information is, where the people are, where the data's at, So you compromise one server, then maybe you pivot to another machine. A lot of companies with on-premises Active Directory don't follow zero trust models, like we talked about in network security. And as a result, it's like Swiss cheese. You can go move about, you can hop between machines, you can pass the hash in Active Directory, and you can abuse the hell out of trust relationships because they just assume you're on the network and can abuse the trust. So lateral movement, and this can be between cloud providers. So let's say for example, if you get a super admin account in Okta, you fish an IT or security engineer, they have Okta rights. If you then get into Okta, you can then pretty much move to any application. So that's equivalent game over that you see in Active Directory environments. So you want to like guard and protect those environments. So you're moving laterally to apps, you're moving laterally to data, clouds. It's different. It's not just inherently secure. I talked about this in week 5. You can't just assume that you're secure because AWS is there protecting you. You still have to manage your security. It's just different elements of it because of the shared responsibility model. So then you move laterally. Beyond that, then you want to, as you're in, you need to create some kind of persistence. So in the event that like the hole is plugged and they find out how you originally got in, you need a way of backup. So this can be something as simple as PowerShell scripts, that run on domain controllers, or having like a payload that runs on an AWS S3 bucket to call like a EC2 instance to continue to give you sort of access back into that environment. Because like I said, if you get booted, you want the adversaries want to still stay in there so they can wreak havoc. And that's often one of the most difficult challenges in all of this is trying to get people out. You plug one hole, you don't know if that's all of them. And so you just have to, you have to really be hunting. You have to do threat hunting. You have to do all these different things to be able to, snuff out persistence. And then for 6, this is kind of like the end goal in most cases. It's what's called data exfiltration. Essentially, you're going to get to the company, the crown jewels, like all the healthcare records for a company, or the intellectual property for an engineering firm. You're going to, adversary is going to move that data from wherever it is to another location. Look at the target breach for an example of like an incredible data exfiltration process that went over this, like the course of, a year and many months. They had a really ingenious way of doing it, through batch files on mainframes, and it was slow and steady, but they got all those credit card numbers. They wrecked people. So getting that data, that database, usernames, passwords, sensitive information, intellectual property, trade secrets, and so on. And then from there, then normally, so if it's real adversary, hits onto the next one, or they dump the database, reveal, sell the stuff. But if you're a red teamer, you're doing this for the good of an organization, then it would be like lessons learned. So, you work with your blue team, and together you kind of have a purple team that facilitates, the work between defenders and red teamers, because there's often, like a lot of friction. Red teamers want to be such snowflakes and do whatever they want. Blue teamers get annoyed. They're like, why are you just breaking things? Why aren't you protecting anything? You're annoying. So that kind of is like the phase of like adversarial behavior and offensive security. So this was like one kind of passive, one way in, and I would say this is common as like, and then well, let me mention this. There's kind of this is the equivalent of in football, like an onside kick. There is another way in here rather than this sort of process where you're doing recon and an outside and you're really not involved, and that's physical security. So the reason I call it an onside kick is because it's risky. It doesn't always work, but when it does, you get a huge advantage. So if you're able to get physical access, mostly to like old companies that run their own infrastructure, and you want to go in that way, that's a particular shortcut into a network. But a lot of companies don't have physical infrastructure, so again, that's like why it's an onside kick. Hey, gentlemen. Sorry, I flew ahead on this lesson, so I'm going to send the recording out.
Hi, Justin.
Hey, how are you, Jennifer?
I'm good. I keep getting, sorry about that. I keep getting notifications to let someone from autopilot. Should I deny or admit?
Yeah, don't even worry about it. Yeah, and my bad. I kind of just threw this lesson together ad hoc, and didn't really tell anyone until the last minute. So you kind of caught the end, but I'm going to send out the recording. But let me just give you the long and short of it. This whole lesson, it went sideways or went into a different direction. It's all about hacking, red teaming, which is what I love. Kind of going through what it looks like to have like an adversarial campaign, either simulated by a red team, which is what companies will build internally to continuously test for security, or like a real world adversary. And they kind of go through different processes, recon, weaponization, exploit, lateral movement, persistence, data exfil, lessons learned, boom. So those are like the 7 things that I just covered prior to you joining. But yeah, this is the fun stuff. And then the kind of last bit of it is there's physical security, which is like I tell in football analogy, it's an onside kick. Doesn't usually work or it's risky, but when it does, you get a huge advantage. But this is only applicable to companies like Marriott that have lots of physical infrastructure. If you're a cloud company, this isn't really relevant at all. So yeah, this is kind of my speed lesson for the day. Just kind of was inspired to put something together since I missed it last Sunday. But how are you? Jenna?
Yes, sir. Yes, I'm right here. I had to put myself on mute so we could hear you talk. I'm doing good.
Yeah, it's good to hear from you. I was supposed to be up this week, and it just the travel booking got all screwy, and so I'm still in Richmond. I've not made it up there. I was meant to hit you up. Apologies. Yeah, it's just a big company. They don't know what they're doing, so they never properly booked my travel up there, which is kind of bizarre. So I might go tomorrow. If I do, I'll let you know.
All right. Well, let me know. I'm here.
Yeah. I'm hoping to get there tomorrow. So it's good to see you, beautiful, you princess. Yeah. So that's offensive security in a nutshell. It's all about hacking and whacking and doing things you're not supposed to do, but really fun to do them anyway. So
can you go over the seven things you were talking about?
Yeah. Let me go through. So So this is really like what's called a campaign, and like I said, this can be either a red team campaign, which your company is going to run with an internal team, sanctioned, approved. The goal is to improve your security posture by working with your blue team, which are your defenders, to point out the vulnerabilities and actually fix them. But this campaign is also the same for adversaries. They follow this methodology because it works, because you kind of have to go, in this particular steps in order to have success. So kind of the first step with any of these campaigns is, doing reconnaissance. And there's like 2 different types. One is called passive. So passive is really another form of this is called open source intelligence, OSINT. This is like scraping the internet for publicly available information that can be used to build a profile on a company, on an individual, because it's just readily available. So like court records, LinkedIn, Instagram posts, Spokio, all these different sources of info that are just publicly available and there for the taking. And you can automate collection, aggregation, and analysis of this to really understand an organization without ever touching their network, without ever stepping foot in their door or in their environment. This is like really, really valuable information. And like I said, it's publicly available. A lot of times companies don't realize it, but it's just kind of sitting there. So that's normally enough to like build the profile as your first step. But then if you want to go a step further, there's active enumeration, and that's when you're kind of like aggressively targeting an organization. You're doing like port scans, you're looking for vulnerabilities, you're actually trying to do DNS zone transfers, you're sending, you're doing application attacks, SQL injection, cross-site request forgery, like stuff that will be detected by a security team in their defenses, assuming they have adequate defenses. It's also valuable, but it's noisy. It's more known. If you can get what you need to from passive reconnaissance, that's the way to go. And so then once you have like your reconnaissance, your next step 2, is like what they call weaponization. So based off this information, you then kind of build a method to attack a particular person. So most of these weaponizations going to target layer 8 humans, because humans are the most vulnerable. Humans are at the top of the OSI model. If you get them, you undermine security at the lower levels. So this may be something as trivial as sending like a spear phishing email, or not trivial, but this is effective. So spear phishing is like phishing, but the idea here is using OSINT. You know a lot about this company, so you craft an email, a phishing email, for like an executive, like the CTO, based off of real information. So maybe the CEO, the CTO, just had developed a relationship with Google. You want to send them a link from their partner, as like an intermediary, like, hey, thanks so much for your time. Please, send the transactions or sign this particular document so we can send it to our legal team. And you click the link, sends you to ostensibly a legitimate place, but really it's phishing. They'll capture your password, or they'll have you open like a malicious file. That's the weaponization part. That's 2. And that's really important. And then 3 is like when it's been weaponized, then the actual exploitation happens. And this can be a number of different ways. So, you can get someone to open a malicious Word document that runs ransomware. You can have someone open spear phishing email and target, like send them to what looks like their single sign-on page, but it's actually, phishing, capture their credentials, get access. This is particularly helpful against like IT admins and security engineers that have, lots of access to systems, because once you get that, then you are able to, perform a lot of the other actions that you want, in step 4. So some kind of exploit, or maybe you have a particular exploit that targets vulnerable infrastructure based off of what you determined from your OSINT. So, Apache Struts with Equifax was a big vulnerability just sitting out there on the wild. Equifax security knew about it. Nobody did anything. Next thing you know, the adversaries went in the front door, completely exfiltrated every single credit report. We're still feeling the effects of this to this day. So it's insidious. So, the exploit is important. That's what gets you the foothold in the network, and then allows you to go elsewhere, which is step 4. Step 4 is lateral movement. So once you're in the network, you want to do have situational awareness, and you want to say, okay, I'm here now. Let me hop around. Let me go to other systems. Let me, move to applications. So like if you can take over the identity provider, like an Okta or a OneLogin, you can then, as an admin, get access to all the applications the organization uses through single sign-on, which is really bad. And all the data, you can pretty much provision access for yourself and just hop in the different apps and get what you need to. Same with Amazon Web Services. If you're in the cloud, if you get in their environment, you can then start to look around for other resources. So maybe you got onto an EC2 instance, which is a machine, but you're trying to go to look at buckets. So you're going to move laterally. You're going to go try to get other resources of value until you find ultimately what you're looking for, which is normally the data. But before you do that, you got to go down to step 5, which is persistence. So once you're in the network, the environment, you need to make sure that you don't just get booted and have no way in. So like back in. So if they like plug a hole, that better not be the only way in which you got in. So you have to create, ways in which you can continue to have access. So maybe you're running like scheduled jobs on a Linux server or tasks, for example, on Windows, or maybe you have like a particular Lambda function in AWS that will call an S3 bucket every day that then drops a payload on. Like there's a lot of different ways in which to maintain access. And once an adversary is in at this level, it's really hard to get them out because of all the ways in which they can maintain access. Depending on what they have access to, in a lot of cases, the advice is like burn it to the ground. Like if an adversary gets into Microsoft Active Directory and they become like the domain admin, which is God mode, it's pretty much impossible to guarantee that you got them out. You almost have to start over with your whole company, which is crazy. So an adversary is going to want to stay in the network, in the environment, through any number of different means. And 6 is really the ultimate kind of goal in all of this, which is you want to take the data and you want to exfiltrate it. You want to move it off of these companies' systems and resources and take it and do whatever, dump it on the dark web, start to look at people's credentials, access healthcare data, figure out other partners or bigger targets, and there's any number of things that are available when you get to the databases, when you get to the Google Docs. Like if you get that level of admin access and you can access all the company's data, it's game over. It's bad news. And the target breach is a really great example. I mean, not great. It's a terrible situation, but it really demonstrates how to do data exfiltration in a like proficient, systematic, and like methodical, but also like patient way. It took over 15 months to move the data, the 70 million credit cards off target systems, and then nobody noticed. They would just blend in with normal mainframe batch jobs. They like back up this, run that. It looked pretty straightforward. In reality, there was a lot going on behind the scenes, and like I said, all the credit card numbers were exfiltrated. Very effective, and that's the goal. And then 7, depending on, normally when it's a red team or a red team, you're gonna focus on lessons learned. So based off of this campaign and the success or failure of it, what have you learned? Work with your blue team, your purple team, make the security improvements, turn on better logging and alerting, use honey tokens, any number of ways in which to improve your posture so that the next campaign is not as successful, with the red team. And, if you aren't a red team, if you're an adversary, step 7 is going to be, normally profiting from the data, dumping it or selling it on the dark web or, ransomware, any number of things. So that's kind of like the phases of an offensive security campaign, be it, real world adversary or red team campaign that an organization kind of hires to do this continuously. And yeah, that's the essence of it. Making sense? I'll take that as a yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Any follow-up questions? I know I flew through it. Oh, okay, cool. We're good. Well, this is good. I actually got to go through it twice, and that is always good, just for what do you call, and repetition and all that. So this was fun. The syllabus is going to change probably from this here on out. It's going to be more targeted. I'll send an updated one, but yeah, this is week 9. Offensive security. Like I said last week, 1 through 8 is part 1. That's the core fundamental security knowledge you need. With that and the rabbit holes you go down, you can get a job in the security industry. And so talk to me if you're interested in figuring out the next steps and how to actually make that a reality. Security is very lucrative. It's very enjoyable. It's designed for people that are that like stimulation, excitement, and kind of require constant feedback loops. You know, you want to know in security if what you're doing works or not, and that's why office security is the best. So with that, I'll leave you all. Thank you. Until next time. Peace. See you, Jennifer. Talk soon.
Bye, Justin. Thank you.
Yep. Bye bye.